I started studying, well, I actually finished studying medicine, became a doctor, got licensed, did 2 years of a residency in internal medicine, and I have to say it was probably the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life to walk away from that. I can remember being with people in the emergency room, being with, say, a gang, two halves of a gang, been in a gang fight, both of them shot. You put your hand on somebody, and you look into his eyes and say, "You're going to be all right. You're going to live." And there's this wonderful moment when you really commune with another person. And I remember I made a decision to leave. There was nothing that brought it on specifically, but I made a decision to leave because I really had some ambition to be a writer, and I knew I wouldn't ever do it. I would never try for that dream if I had this other thing going. And I remember saying to myself, just keep walking, you know, left foot, right foot. I walked out that day and panicked because now all I had to do was write. The best advice I've ever heard about writing is write one word every day. And I do that. I try, well, I take the weekends off, I make it a job. I hate to write. I hate to write. I loathe writing. But there's something in it that brings me back. This novel started out as a very personal, small story of, in my mind at least, a boy who jumps classes, a boy who starts in the working class and ends in the sort of aristocratic class, in a sense, at least by education and exposure. And it started out with a single scene on a sailboat of a young man who's sort of out of his element, sailing with a very wealthy family, when suddenly the girl, the older girl of that family, a teenager, drops off the back of the boat and drops herself into the water to get his attention. And up until that point, I was struggling, and suddenly when that happened, I somehow knew that I had a novel there. I think every writer has in his past the book that made him or her want to be a writer. For me, that book was John Cheever's Collected Stories, which won the Pulitzer Prize. I was an engineering major in college, studying physics, studying engineering. I thought novels were for the soft-minded, and I stumbled on this book. I opened it up, and I think from that day forward, I wanted to be a writer. What is it? It's just, what is this? Just the sound of words. It's the sense of jumping from yourself into another character, of feeling what another character feels. That was such a lift to me at that moment. Evan Cannell's books, Mr. Bridge and Mrs. Bridge, particularly for me, Mr. Bridge, even though Mrs. Bridge is the more popular book, was a real revelation in how to write a novel. Barry Unsworth's Sacred Hunger, a great and monumental work of fiction about a 17th century slave ship. There's probably 100 pages about what they call the Middle Passage, of slaves in that ship as they cross the Atlantic that are as riveting and beautiful as you will ever read in your life. Some books that I've read recently enjoyed Janice Johnson's Tree of Smoke. Is so full of gorgeous and really just knockout writing. Another book I love recently is Deborah Eisenberg's Twilight of the Superheroes. Just a very complicated, forward-looking, ambitious book of short stories, almost novelistic in their scope. Another writer I love is a Canadian writer named Alice Munro, a short story writer. I particularly am interested in her because of the span of her career. She seemed to have discovered something. And her early stories are very conventional. They sort of rose, and about 2/3 of the way through there was something climactic happened, and they sort of dropped off the way a story was supposed to. And late in her life, she just sort of took the string that was holding it all together and pulled it out, and the pieces fell onto the floor. And she just set the pieces as they were, and that's been a real lesson to me in structuring a story and what a reader will do to put together the important parts of a story. I grew up in a family of musicians, and I didn't get any of the talent, I didn't get the ear, but I got that thing where, you know, a few notes strung together can make me weep. And I also had to translate it for words, and there were a few words strung together can make me weep. And I hope that I can do that for readers the way music has always done for me and the way books have always done for me.